Hey, I'm Kenneth Wajda. I'm a professional photographer here in Colorado. Welcome to another one of my real-life experience photo talks about cameras I actually use. Before we get started, I have to ask you if you are enjoying these shows, if you get something from them, if you can contribute a little bit. This is springtime coming up, and I am in a place where I usually do a lot of conference work for clients and their events, but there aren't any conferences this year because everything got canceled from last year. And the pandemic has made it really difficult to be a freelancer these days. So I've been upping the number of shows I'm doing a week. If you can add a little bit to contribute to the shows to keep them going, I would really appreciate it. And I'll keep bringing you photo talks. You can go to supportkenneth.com or hit the Patreon link, and I'll have those in the show notes. All right, so today's camera that I want to talk about, having used it and really knowing it pretty well, is this Olympus OM2n. And I'm a huge fan of the Olympus OM2n. It's funny because some cameras I'll take out with just certain lenses. This one I'll typically take out with a 100mm 2.8. I have a 100mm 2.8 and I have a 50mm 1.4. These two, I've never put them into a case. They just go out and they go onto the car seat or put this in a coat pocket. It's got a Boss Fujica lens hood that is square that came off some other lens. And these two lenses on this camera make for a great walk around small camera that doesn't weigh anything. It has automation. You can put it in auto for aperture priority, which I'm a huge fan of aperture priority. If you're just going to set the camera at what the meter tells you to do anyway, you may as well just set the aperture and let the camera do the work. If you want to make sure that your exposure is right, set the exposure compensation for plus 2/3 of a stop, or rate your 400 speed film at like 250, which will make the camera think it's not as sensitive. It'll add a little bit more density to your negative. Everybody in photography shooting negatives likes a dense negative. And the worst thing you can do is shoot a thin underexposed negative. You can get away with 6 stops overexposure. You can't get away with more than 1 stop underexposure. So err on the side of overexposure. But the OM2n, look how small that is. It's got a great viewfinder. I swear the viewfinder on the Olympus cameras, it feels like it's one of the largest viewfinders I've ever seen. You feel like you're just really seeing a view that is right, filling your frame inside your viewfinder. And then besides that, it's not a 100% viewfinder, it's a 92 or 93%, which if you're shooting slides, there is a reason to get a Nikon F3 and shoot with a 100% viewfinder. But it's a lot bigger of a camera. If you're shooting with this, and you can have a little bit extra than you think, and that's something you can work in your crop later, this is a camera that I think is a workhorse. And the OM1 is legendary. The OM3 is very expensive because it was scarce. And the OM4, the original one, has some electronic problems. Their TI, their titanium later ones were all good. But the 2 and the 2N, you can find them. And they're not terribly expensive. I'm sure I didn't spend more than $100, probably $60 on this camera and lens. And with a 51.4, you've got a great 2-camera system for, again, a day trip. You don't want to go and carry a lot. You want to go light. You want a little automation so you don't have to set the exposure and watch the meter too closely. If you're outside, you put it at f5.6 or 8, good to go. If you're inside, open it wide open, wide as you can, why not? You're inside, shoot it wide open, and you're good to go. The camera, if there's any film in it, the cameras are known, you can always tell if a camera has film in it by hitting the rewind. If it rewinds and it doesn't stop turning it, there's no film in it. And it's got a really nice smooth shutter. Its wind isn't as buttery sharp as a Leica, but it feels like quality, and I haven't had any trouble with Olympus stuff. I find that the shutter speed being around this collar right back here, that's a little bit odd. And again, because I usually use it as an aperture priority camera, it doesn't matter to me where the shutter speed dial is because I'm just setting the aperture on the lens. and then I'm letting the camera do whatever it wants to do. And I'm aware if I'm going to point it at somebody standing in the dark shadow with a bright background, I'm not going to let the camera get fooled. But overall, this is a great auto exposure camera for aperture priority. Combine it with this lens, put a simple donkey strap on and throw it over your shoulder, you're good to go. So highly recommend it. That's the Olympus OM2n. All right, I welcome your comments. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If you're enjoying these, hit the subscribe button. If you can support, again, I please ask. Please do if you can. I'll be back next week. We'll talk more photography. As always, here's the good light.